September 7th and the center of Moscow has been blown up.
In the center, right in the center. Basically, a drone just exploded with a huge vibration. Everyone woke up. We don't even know yet which tower got hit.
The new Flamingo missiles are striking Moscow. Or rather, they've blown it up again.
Part of the capital complex. It's in Moscow City.
Donald Trump is sending Tomahawks and JASSMs to strike Moscow.
I caught that on camera.
The third and final phase of the special operation known as Web has officially begun.
Quiet, quiet, quiet. Are you filming?
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Reports indicate that all Moscow airports are currently closed. There are also unconfirmed reports of significant sabotage and intense gunfire occurring near the Kremlin. Muscovites are in a panic. Evacuation has begun. What's happening? Guys, there are families and children there after work. The SBU is preparing new acts of sabotage on Russian territory. Moscow, St. Petersburg, get ready to evacuate. We'll discuss all this with Ruslan Kutayev right now.
So, there was a significant missile strike that occurred.
A new phase of the war. In the past 48 hours, Ukraine has carried out a series of devastating strikes on the KHMAO gas pipeline. These are explosions 3,000 kilometers from Moscow, strikes on the Pacific Fleet, the Black Sea Fleet. Russia is losing. Depots are being destroyed. The Kstovo and Borisogledski airfields, refineries are burning. But most importantly, thousands of drones are flying toward Moscow and St. Petersburg, and Donald Trump has decided to provide Ukraine with JASSM missiles, American missiles that will strike Moscow and St. Petersburg with a range of 1,000 kilometers. And that's incredibly powerful. Moreover, he made a statement that he is ready to impose hellish sanctions against Russia. Let's discuss all this with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev. Ruslan Mukhomedovich, welcome.
Dasha, hello to you. Greet our esteemed viewers.
Ruslan Mukhomedovich, a new phase of the war. 1,000 drones are flying toward Moscow and St. Petersburg. Moreover, the American JASSM missiles are ready to be deployed. What do you think?
I want to remind you of Zaluzhny's remarkable article from back in the day, where he said, warning both America and European countries, in modern life, in modern warfare, it is not people who win, but technology. And Ukraine did just that, because Zaluzhny, who was still the commander at the time, laid that groundwork. The Ukrainian authorities understood this, and I think Europe did too, without a doubt. And now, when it comes to drone technologies, Ukraine has made real progress. I always say this with pleasure. The remarkable ingenuity of Ukrainian engineers is so profoundly great that now they can quite easily fly their advanced drones far beyond the Urals, where they effectively strike various strategic targets, causing significant and widespread damage, and they are indeed doing this on a truly massive scale. That's absolutely right, as you precisely stated. They can effectively reach St. Petersburg, Moscow, and any other crucial military targets with impressive precision. Unlike the Russians, the Ukrainians consistently strike specifically at crucial strategic targets, legitimate military targets, or at the very worst, targets of a semi-military nature, carefully avoiding civilian infrastructure. And in this regard, Ukraine has now made significant progress. Putin, in his behavior, such brazen behavior, not only ignores Trump, but is actually quite mocking towards him, especially as Putin's propagandists have started to act. Finally, it got through to Trump. At last, someone in his inner circle managed to tell him, to show him, that in Moscow they're mocking him. And he has truly started to make some significant moves. God willing, he absolutely keeps it up. And now, in the context of America, first and foremost, what they had previously stopped, they have now fully resumed. And as you have rightly said, they are actively planning to supply long-range missiles, which is a very important development. And soon it won't just be drones, but missiles that will reach both Moscow and St. Petersburg, and targets that until now were out of Ukraine's reach. That's indeed very good news. That's exceptionally good news, because the nation of Ukraine is now making a fresh, significant, and renewed emphasis that the ongoing war will definitively reach a crucial turning point in the near future. And we have other news as well. Donald Trump himself explicitly stated, Europe will finance, Europe will indeed pay, and America will then sell essential weapons to Ukraine, specifically for the benefit of Ukraine. And this crucial news, which is steadily and consistently reaching us here in our nation, is also, without a doubt, reaching Russia. They are already starting to throw a significant fit over there, expressing their considerable displeasure and growing frustration. And, well, let them continue to do it. And Ukraine will ultimately win. It most certainly and definitively will achieve victory. And Merz, he's awesome. I just truly can't seem to get enough of him. Every single day without fail, he consistently makes such pleasant and agreeable statements. Defense Minister Merz, he always says such wonderfully nice things, truly delightful. And all of this makes us happy. Why? Because Ukraine will ultimately and decisively win, because we will certainly overcome our formidable enemy, because we are indeed winning this crucial struggle. And this is becoming so obvious now. For me, it was always obvious that never, under any circumstances, would Russia defeat Ukraine. So these are the good news, Dasha, and we are happy and we understand that everything is turning out much better than they thought in Russia.
Ruslan Mukhomedovich, what do the 1,000-kilometer range JASSM missiles mean first and foremost for Putin? And how will Russian war correspondents and propagandists react to this?
You know, if you consider this in Russian terms, they will undoubtedly say they will be firing their weapons there, directly striking the Kremlin and even the State Duma. Absolutely not. At most, only if Ukraine is forced to, they might go for it. They will target military factories. I want to remind our viewers, Moscow, the Moscow region, both near and far, Tula, Vladimir region, all of these are packed with military enterprises producing weapons, ammunition, and military technologies. And that's why, first and foremost, this is a signal. If a drone strikes, but several drones, dozens of drones, can halt a factory, can destroy a factory. But a missile is a nightmare for Russia and for Russians, because in reality, with just one or two strikes, these factories will cease to exist. So this is very good news. This is good news, along with the fact that I want to remind everyone, Ukrainians have not stopped. They are improving the Neptune, which has the same 1,000-kilometer strike range. If anyone thinks that this production has been abandoned, they are mistaken. In fact, it seems to me that soon Ukraine won't need either American or European missiles because their scientists are improving and working on their own. And if Ukraine's military-industrial complex truly starts producing these essential items on a significant industrial scale, then I can confidently and unequivocally state that it certainly won't take an extensive amount of time, perhaps 3 years or even 5 years, although, unfortunately, the prevailing conditions of this ongoing war are undeniably tough and challenging. But Ukraine itself will very soon bring its military-industrial equipment and development complex to such a significantly advanced level that they will confidently be able to even sell their innovative products and technologies to other countries around the globe. This is indeed good news, Dasha, truly good news and very positive expectations for the future.
Samvel Fyodorovich, what does Trump's statement about possibly imposing sanctions against Russia mean? Will these be hellish 500% tariffs? Or will they be more lenient for the Kremlin and those countries that buy energy resources from the Russian Federation, the aggressor country?
I'll be honest with you, we've already gotten used to Trump's behavior. This is blackmail against Putin. He's blackmailing Putin. They talked about something, they made some kind of deal, as Trump says, they had some sort of arrangement, but apparently Trump didn't fulfill his part of that deal. We suspect that his part was the capitulation of Ukraine. Neither Putin nor Trump together will ever be able to achieve that. And that's precisely why now we can accurately guess what significant signals Putin and Trump are sending to each other. And these crucial 50 days are what Trump essentially gave Putin. Either you meet me halfway and we promptly start implementing our agreed upon deal, their specific deal, or I will steadfastly continue to fund arms. Yes, in fact, funding Ukraine amounts to precisely the same thing. And now Trump will patiently wait to see what new initiatives come forth from Putin. If something comes from Putin that Trump is expecting, Trump could change his position with a statement without batting an eye. I think Ukraine understands and realizes this well. In Europe, they understand and realize this too. That's why European countries have set their sails to full strength. Without looking back at America, they have started putting their industrial enterprises into operation, so to speak. I've said this before. Germany's automotive sector, for example, Volkswagen has announced that they are halting civilian production and switching to military-industrial development in Germany. So we will listen to Trump. We like the way he speaks, but to trust Trump completely and rely solely on him would be to deceive ourselves. So we move forward. As long as Trump is providing all this, great, that's good. Even if he stops providing it when he starts to hold back, I hope Europe will step in and Ukraine will step in as well. In general, it's important for viewers to hear this. Lately, dear viewers, Ukraine doesn't just want shells and ammunition, they want to develop their industry, their military industry. They want to build up their own military industrial complex. And this is a state-level approach. And they will produce their own shells, their own missiles, their own drones, and their own aircraft. And here, I'm not overreaching. It won't be long before Ukraine has and produces its own aircraft. And they already have the foundation for it. We know what Ukraine is, what Mykolaiv is, the shipbuilding industry, and what kind of ships will come out of the shipyards of Mykolaiv and Odessa. And this is what we're waiting for. The Caucasus is waiting for such an industrial, strong Ukraine because we are allies, because we are brotherly peoples and will stand together against our enemies. So, Dasha, these are not empty expectations of someone just lying around doing nothing. These are real actions that are taking place. We are pushing for this to move faster, to go better, and we are happy when this is being done, and all of this is really happening.
Dear audience, please like this video. Write a few kind words in support of Ukraine in the comments. We work for an audience all over the world. This is very important. What else? A very important point is that Merz has not yet handed over the Taurus missiles to us. Today, the German Minister of Defense said that there will be no Taurus missiles, but as far as we understand, at the end of this month, in other words, very soon, a batch of missiles, long-range Ukrainian missiles, will arrive. Germany financed the production of these missiles. So essentially, Germany funded a batch of Ukrainian long-range missile production. So what do you think of that?
Let's take a moment to perhaps do a little bit of speculating just for a moment. What if the Germans are supplying Taurus missiles and they're providing the funding for the shells so that the Taurus's contents can soon be rebranded with a Ukrainian name like Bodan or something else? So I don't rule anything out here. And that's why we see Germany's attitude, the stance of Merz, Pistorius. In general, there are a lot of realizations about Europe right now. I see that when meeting with German politicians 2 years ago and now, they are different people. They've suddenly started to understand, to realize that the front line isn't just Ukraine's front line in Ukraine, but it's actually the front line of Europe, of Germany and France in Ukraine. And now, in their understanding, they're even ahead of France, and I fear even ahead of Britain. Britain, we remember in 2022, in 2021, even before Russia's invasion, what enormous efforts both Johnson and Britain made when they essentially declared that even if the whole world refused to help, Britain, Poland, and Ukraine, united in alliance, would do everything possible to resist Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that's why even such an ally as Britain, now it seems to me, is being overshadowed by Germany with its initiatives and its understanding that victory is necessary. By the way, Merz is already speaking openly about this. Russia must be defeated, and Ukraine will do it. And so overall, we expect that every day we will be receiving good news. Good news from the military-industrial complex of Germany, or more precisely from Germany's defense industry.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Ruslan Mukametyevich, regarding the current situation with Putin engaging in missile and drone terror, drones are flying, ballistic missiles, MiGs are taking off. In other words, Putin is constantly attacking Ukraine.
Moreover, at one time they convinced Putin that for Russia, remember when Margarita Simonyan said, we'll just blink or wink and Kyiv will be ours. And so Putin and his emissaries convinced the American side that there was nothing to even think about or discuss here. Russia is defeating Ukraine. And so in order for these claims and initiatives they announced to be confirmed, that's why these things are happening, so that someone like Kellogg would say, yes, Russia has carried out both missile and drone attacks. And all of this continued. By doing this, Putin thinks he is demonstrating, so that it will be reported to Trump, that Russia is now carrying out very serious attacks and conducting these military operations against both Kyiv and all of Ukraine. I think there's also a bit of a secret to Putin's behavior here. Nothing will help, neither persuasion nor Trump's ignoring it. Trump himself is now, as we know, in trouble for another reason, because of Epstein. But right now, MAGA, which is the very core of Trump's support, has turned against him. Trump is now losing ground very seriously. And if he now loses his connection with Ukraine, 70% of Republicans, American voters, are in favor of funding and supporting Ukraine. And Trump is not free right now. And maybe if he were free, he would act completely differently because he is not particularly known for his love of Ukraine or Ukrainians. And that's why we need to understand that it is the voters, the mood of Americans, including a large part of, let's say, the Reagan wing of the Republicans, who support Ukraine. And that's why we have what we have right now. All of this combined, this entire situation, truly puts significant pressure on Donald Trump. It all heavily weighs on him, and he is being given very clear and unmistakable signals that Trump should act actively and decisively in strong support of Ukraine. And that's why none of Putin's initiatives, none of his maneuvers, no matter how many strikes he carries out against peaceful Ukrainians, defenseless children, women. By the way, their favorite pastime is killing defenseless people. We know from the 2 wars in Chechnya that they kill the most defenseless. They fire at markets, they fire at hospitals, at mosques, at maternity wards. They think that by doing this, they'll cause panic, back then among Chechens, now among Ukrainians, and that the Ukrainian population will rise up, stage some kind of Maidan, and demand that Zelensky stop the war. There's one thing they don't understand. On the contrary, it's precisely because of their actions that contempt and hatred toward Putin and Russians is growing. Now, Ukrainians will fight to the last person without hesitation, but they will never accept this invasion by Putin and his ideology of Russian Nazism.
Dear audience, Ruslan Mukametovich Kutay and I work for you every week, as always. We work for an audience all over the world, so your support is invaluable. Every like, every comment is priceless. Let us know in the comments what you think about our partnership. What do you think about the fact that Trump is ready to provide Ukraine with long-range JASSM missiles so that it can attack military targets in Moscow and St. Petersburg? And now I can't help but ask you, if Europe lets oil prices drop to $45 per barrel, and if Trump by September for sure, yes, he will impose sanctions, or rather, the Senate will impose secondary sanctions against Russia, could this shake the Kremlin regime, Ruslan Mukametovich? Or will none of this truly matter to Vladimir Putin from an economic or military standpoint, because for him, waging a protracted war against Ukraine ultimately means his political survival and continued power?
These are serious sanctions. If he really, and the Senate is ready, before we talked about 80 people, now there are 85 supporters. And let me remind you, there are only 100 people in the Senate. And that's why this is a very significant number. The Senate is ready to support Ukraine. The Senate is indeed imposing these very aggressive sanctions. They're called aggressive because they will target buyers, Russian oil, specifically the buyers. And who are the buyers? It's China and India. It won't be profitable for them because with these sanctions, it will be better for them to buy Iranian, Saudi, or any other oil since their losses would be significant. And this is a very serious blow, an extremely serious blow to Russia, to the Russian economy. Dasha, you and I have talked about this many times. We've cited the numbers. The economy in Russia has already hit rock bottom. Right now, all it takes is to give this little house a shake, and it will simply fall apart. And frankly speaking, everyone will be buried in the ruins of this house. That's why the situation in Russia is extremely difficult and complicated. If these sanctions start to take effect, it will finish off the Russian economy, and the front will collapse. And that's where some very interesting questions arise. I've been saying this since the very beginning of the war. 1.5 to 2 million killers. Killers from prisons, from wherever. They even forced normal people to the front and turned them into killers. People who despise Putin, who despise the authorities, because after surviving those Meatgrinder assaults, all they have left is contempt and hatred for the Russian government. And everywhere you look, wherever we turn our gaze, there are always significant and persistent problems for Russia, for the Russian authorities, for the prevailing Russian ideology. And that, indeed, is truly good news for the entire progressive world, and most importantly, for Ukraine.
Donald Trump made a statement that the US and NATO have reached an agreement to supply weapons to Ukraine at the expense of the Europeans. As I understand it, NATO will pay the United States of America for the supply of weapons. Another statement from the US president. The US will impose secondary sanctions on Russia and its partners if there is no deal for a peaceful settlement in Ukraine. The United States will impose 100% import tariffs on Russia and its trading partners if Moscow and Washington do not reach an agreement on Ukraine. 100%? The coordination of American arms supplies to Ukraine will be handled by NATO and the US permanent representative to the alliance, Whitaker. Trump stated that he is dissatisfied with Russia's position on Ukraine. Billions of dollars worth of military equipment will be quickly paid for by NATO and distributed on the battlefield in Ukraine. We received the figure of 100%. The United States will impose 100% import tariffs on Russia and its trading partners. This sounds very realistic and very strong, actually, because we understand perfectly well that 500 is a lot, and it wasn't very realistic. But 100% is also a lot, yet it's realistic. What do you think? What will China and India do at that point? I'm really curious to see.
Dasha, 500% really is just pure fantasy. 100% is enough. If you want to know, 50% is a lot, but 100 is deadly. 100 is deadly. And that's why now look at how much Trump's rhetoric has softened. Previously, he wouldn't even allow talk of NATO supplying weapons to Ukraine. He said that European countries could do it if they wished. He raised the issue to rule out NATO supplying weapons because the US is a NATO member. Do you see now? The United States itself is now saying that through NATO, we will supply weapons. What a softening, a shift in America's attitude, and above all, Donald Trump's attitude toward Ukraine. This is really noticeable. And here you're right. If that's the case, 500% was just made up. Now they are shifting into such a practical plane of understanding for people, for states, for heads of state, and in fact for politicians, political scientists, and experts. 100% is a good number. It's a strong figure, and it already looks and sounds much more realistic.
By itself. As for Trump's statement, another 17 Patriot systems are being prepared for shipment. 17! A large number of these systems will be on the battlefield. We have spent about $350 billion on the Russia-Ukraine war, and we wanted it to end. Ukraine will feel that it has become stronger. 17 Patriot systems. The introduction of secondary tariffs in the US in the absence of progress on Ukraine will not require congressional approval. So essentially, we've gathered here now to discuss Trump's key statements that were made on Monday. 17 Patriot systems. What do you think?
That's very significant. In order to protect Ukraine, experts said that at least another 7 to 9 Patriot systems were needed. If America had already provided coverage, at least not for the frontline areas, but for the deeper regions, say Odessa, Kyiv, and other regions, they would be fully protected. 17 Patriot systems means that all of Ukraine would be covered. This means that the already supplied F-16s will be able to operate very effectively, inflicting serious damage. Why? Because when the sky is protected and there is no threat of attacks from the Russian side, then even the Ukrainian Air Force, though it is small, will be able to operate and operate effectively. And here, all the significant advantages start to become quite clearly apparent, truly forming a strong chain of new and important relations being carefully built between America, in other words, President Trump and the nation of Ukraine. And that can't help but make us happy. And we sincerely and genuinely hope that these important initiatives he has announced won't just remain as mere proposals, but will actually be thoroughly and effectively put into practical implementation and tangible practice. At the same time, I want to address the viewers. This is important because I am often asked, what if Trump suspends these announced actions and doesn't follow through? Dear viewers, the political and military leadership of Ukraine is working so seriously with European countries, with European ministries of defense, that they are trying during this period, in this time frame, to make up for any potential losses from America. I think it won't be long before, frankly, America won't even be needed. Yes, today it is needed. Yes, until autumn, America is definitely needed. We know one thing for sure. Russia's summer offensive has completely failed. They wanted to blackmail Ukraine by approaching Sumy and Zaporizhia, shelling these cities and using that as leverage to force Ukraine to retreat from some territories to make concessions. None of that worked out for them. You should read and listen to Russian war correspondents. They're absolutely screaming. They're tearing their hair out in utter frustration in one place and indeed everywhere because everything they meticulously planned has completely failed. And it will only get better from here. Much better. I've always said, even a year ago, autumn, September, October of 2025, when Russia will have to fully admit that they can't do anything at that time, and this lull will continue, but this silence won't last long. Ukraine will go on the offensive. How will they organize it? In what way will it be structured? I won't presume to say I'm not a military expert, but I can confidently state that Russia will be finally convinced. Even Russian war correspondents are already saying, that's it, we won't be able to do anything anymore. And Ukraine with new technologies, new supplies and longer range missiles, with planes, with aviation, what Ukraine needs is control of the skies. If Ukraine's skies were closed off with air defense systems, missile defense and aircraft, Ukraine would have won long ago and peace would have come to Ukrainian soil. We are waiting for this, and these are not empty expectations. This is a very clear and consistently pursued course of action by the Ukrainian political and military leadership, which profoundly shows that they precisely know where to go, and they are indeed leading Ukraine and all Ukrainians in the absolutely right direction, specifically toward victory, toward Ukraine's ultimate and decisive victory over Russia.
Ruslan Kamdich, to wrap up, let's touch on a few more quotes from Trump's major statements. Trump stated that Putin won't fool him, and when the talking ends, actions begin. Then the reporter made a statement, if Putin continues to escalate, how far are you willing to go in response? Trump, in what way? How far are you willing to go in response if Putin intensifies his missile and drone attacks on Ukraine? Trump, don't ask me such questions. Ruslan Kamdich, what do you have to say?
He understands. If Russia truly continues its aggression, doesn't cease, and persistently keeps bombing Ukraine, specifically targeting civilians and essential social infrastructure, in that critical case, Trump will have absolutely no viable choice. The entire world simply cannot ignore this escalating situation anymore, and he'll have to take more effective and decisive measures against Russia. There's another question here, and Russia can't stop. As soon as the devastating war finally stops, Vladimir Putin's absolute power, his iron-fisted rule, will undoubtedly be called into serious question. This is because within his inner circle, those influential individuals who have been exceptionally close to him for the past 25 long and eventful years, let's say, the very fundamental foundation of his authoritarian rule, specifically the powerful Federal Security Service, FSB, has now quite unexpectedly become his formidable and dangerous enemy. And it is precisely the war being waged by the Ministry of Defense, its divisions, and what they are doing in Ukraine that prevents the FSB from openly calling for and attempting to overthrow Putin. That's why Putin has major problems. For as long as he has the strength, power, influence, and opportunity, he will continue to push forward in Ukraine. But I really hope that the set of measures that America might take in this case will simply leave him without the strength to continue. And then that will be the end for both Putin and his regime. And then they will start sorting things out among themselves. There are plenty of players, the FSB and Putin. Those 1.5 to 2 million people they sent to kill on the front lines, these killers, now having gained nothing in Ukraine, will go to kill within the government. Yes, they will kill Muslims, they will be directed, their violence will be aimed against people from the Caucasus. But it's still unclear how this will end. We are preparing for this very seriously, and we expect in the end that this evil, which spreads murder and violence throughout the world, the Kremlin of Russia, will eventually collapse. We are doing everything to make that happen, and Ukraine is at the forefront of this war and this struggle.
Dear audience, Ruslan Kamdich and I work for you every week. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Today we discussed Trump transferring JASSM missiles to Ukraine, which can strike military targets in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Changes in Trump's military rhetoric. He will support Ukraine, provide it with offensive and defensive weapons and 17 Patriot systems. NATO will buy weapons for Ukraine from the United States of America, as well as impose 100% tariffs on secondary goods to Russia. That is, countries that buy energy resources from Russia will be subject to 100% tariffs. If Putin does not stop, the Senate may vote for this bill. President of the Assembly of Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev. Ruslan Mukhomedovich, thank you, and as usual, see you next week.
All the best. Take care. See you soon.